And now I've chatted to some people and I'll slowly learn everyone's names. I'll get there. But I was chatting and clearly, you guys are all busy and you have stuff to do and, life gets in the way. And so if you don't come to all four, it's not going to be a crisis. My grad students will know. My grad students, very ownership statement. The people I work with know that I'm not like that or it will be fine. Moss has organised a video, so if you miss a session, please you can watch it on the video. That's the idea. So the idea is to have a really enjoyable 4 sessions, 2 weeks apart. My plan is, and I know this sounds pretty harsh, but my plan is also to leave some homework between sessions. That's why I left 2 weeks. Because I thought instead of just me ranting on, because I'm boring, I like you. Instead of me ranting on, we'd actually do some stuff and go, how do I make a curriculum? What shall I do? And actually have a practical go ourselves on the journey. Notwithstanding, as my friends will tell you, I am not one to check if you've done your homework or not. I'm not of that style. So please, it's not like I better not come next time because I haven't done my homework. Forget it. Just come along, be happy and enjoy the journey. And the other thing I hope,
what I really wanted, because this is not in your course, it's not an accessible item, I like doing these courses because they're not. It's sort of like I'd probably get into trouble in the university, but I think that's really nice because it's not, ask what you like. You're not going to get into trouble. There's no assessment. It's not going to cause grief or anything like that. So please, that's the whole idea as well. It's not part of your course. I'm not your supervisors, except for a few people. Mostly I'm not your supervisors. So, and I'm, it's not going to mean anything in that sense. So please enjoy it. Ask the dumbest questions you like, because that's the whole point of the day, to enjoy and to ask the crazy things that you've never thought you're allowed to ask. This is a safe time to ask. That's the plan. We're going to do 4 things. Today, and I really want to thank Mossa for asking me to do this. Forget you guys. For me, this has been a really neat month or so to actually think about what I do, because after 30 years or whatever time I've been doing it, I don't actually...
Sounds strange. I don't actually know what I do until a month ago and actually have to sit down and think,
how does this actually work? It sort of becomes like push-bike riding or something. It becomes natural. So thank you, Mossa and the gang, for asking me, because it's done me good to actually be able to go, how do I make a curriculum? What is important when you sit down and go, you're given a course and you have to start in 3 weeks' time. What should I think about? What's the first thing? So it's been really good for me to sit down and go, what makes logical sense to do? Later on, you'll see I want to talk a little about and share some of my journey about teaching and how different teaching ways and how it's moving in terms of online and things as well. Please, I'm not a formal... There could well be someone here who is doing formal education as their PhD or something. You know what? I'll tell you about my first lecture. That's probably a good start. My first lecture was when I was you. I was a PhD student. My boss was sick. He said, could you go and give a lecture? That was the total training I got on the phone one Sunday. So I don't have all the particular words about how education structure is. You're going to hear the tips and tricks of 30 years of being in the game. That's what this is about. So if you want the formal stuff, go hunting for it. The literature will be there and things. I suspect what I say is probably linked to some formality, but you're going to hear it from a self-taught person today. So that's what we're going to do. I also want to talk about the move to online, because if anyone in this room thinks, particularly today, what a day in Australia, if you haven't heard, the COVID story in this country's just gone really south today. If you think we're going to go back to 1,000 people sitting in a lecture theatre all like this, in your generation of education, then please get over it. That's not going to happen anymore. So I think what we've seen is the pandemic has just brought forward what was coming slowly over time. We were moving to some mixed model of online. So I'm going to give you a little bit of what I think the future looks like in terms of online and how that's going to work. In fact, I think what we were doing today is exactly like the future of education is going to be. A small tutorial where you want some human spirit. You know, we need a cup of tea together. We need to talk. We need to share our history. That will happen. But I think the idea of please write down 6 points of, the anatomy of the leg bone, I think all of that is going to be shifted to do it yourself at home online. So I want to talk through some of that as well. That's the plan. Cool. Please stop me. If you've got a question, vouch for me that you're much better just stopping me and going, stop, I've got a question. Don't hold back and don't sit there and think, oh, he's a professor, I won't ask him. That's not the way it is, okay? So just shout out and go, I've got this question, and we'll just answer it or not answer it. Or just say, good question, don't know. So yeah, please just be open and answering. So that's the sort of story. You've obviously worked out cups of tea and things outside. Please, if during the session you feel like topping your cup up, don't feel you have to sit there and wait for a gap. Just hold your cup up and wander out and get a cup and come back. Be cool. The far end as well, so life is good and we have such a nice room with windows. I do want one little aside for those who are not from University of Western Australia and for Olivia. This room has a very special place in the history of our state and in the history of our university, and for me. You're actually sitting in a room where the very first class in this university's history was ever held in this space. This building wasn't here. This building was actually in the city, and about 20 years ago they took every board down, numbered it, brought it here and rebuilt it. This is the original university. In fact, right there is where the governor sat to sign the document to say we will have a university. Some 115 years ago, 120 years ago. So this room for me has a good spirit. And I think also this room, I also, particularly for international people, this room is a classic Australian room. This is how Australia built. And there's a few interesting things. It built with tall ceilings because the hot air rose. We didn't have these sort of skirting board things on the edge here. The air would come in through the bottom here and circulate upward. We always had lots of big windows because the breeze in the afternoon would cool it down. And we always had these very long verandas because then it kept the sun off the windows and things. So this is actually, for international guests to our country, this is a classic original Australian room. This would have been the dining room. This would have been the dining room for some family in a sense. So it's a great space. Please enjoy the history of it. And if at break time you're interested, there's some pictures and things on the wall of its original heritage and things out the back here. It's now the cricket pavilion, except for this room. Cool. Are we good? Any queries or questions so far? Anything you want to ask or tell me? Or at some point I want to go and everyone, I don't think everyone knows everyone, I suspect, so we're going to go around the room and say where we're from and
what we're doing for our PhDs and studies, or if you're not studying, just say what we're doing with PhD. I thought I'd start with me because
I can get the ball rolling in a sense. I'm Mark Tennant. I'm originally a dentist, but like I say on Twitter, Please don't ask me tooth questions because it's a long time ago. My PhD is in cellular biology, smooth muscle cells, coronary bypasses, that sort of stuff. Since then, my long history has been in what I would call public health, population level research, mathematics, that sort of stuff. My teaching has been in anatomy. Now, some of the exemplars I've sent you, I think Moss has sent out the little bits and things. You'll work out my teachings in anatomy and dentistry and stuff because of the examples I've given out. So that's my history. I've been at this university. My student number, everyone has a student, my student number is 81, the first two digits. So I suspect I've been here longer than most of you have been on this planet. So a very long time in this institution. Yeah, that's me. So should we go around the room? Olivia, I'm going to pick on you first because I know you. Sorry.
I'm Olivia. I'm originally from Brazil. I used to be a dentist. Actually, I graduated in dentistry. But my whole career was in public health as well. I have a master's degree in public health. And here in UWA, I'm doing a PhD in public health, and Mark is one of my supervisors.
And doing it on large scale, population level predictive mathematics for Brazil.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're not talking little Australia at 25 million people. We're talking 10 times that scale.
Yeah, 200 million.
Yeah, plus. Yeah.
Hi, I am Amal Akhili. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I think most of the Saudis you know me. I'm also a dentist, but I forgot everything about dentistry.
Did you ever practice?
No, I just did the 1 year internship. That's it.
That's it. Okay, cool. I've never asked you that before.
Yeah, I'm doing PhD and practice also. But
Hi, my name is Haifa. I am from Saudi Arabia. I am studying PhD in computer science in UWA. I'm now third year computer science.
Wow. Okay, computer science, very big topic. So what are you doing?
I'm in the medical program, so I'm doing some program for obstructive sleep apnea.
Sleep apnea with, he's not here, and Peter from the sleep centre. No? Okay, that's all right. Cool.
I'm Mariam. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I basically work in King Faisal University. Now I'm doing a PhD in educational psychology. And I have been teaching in education for 4 years.
Okay, well, you should be here doing this, not me. You're formally trained. I am a mere learn-on-the-job person. So please, you fix me up if I do something wrong, all right? Whoa, that's wonderful. Very good.
So, my name is Majid Suwaidi. I'm a PhD student in biomedical sciences. I'm located in Bayes Building. I'm doing some human lactation research with Dora Gidis.
Yes.
I'm doing research about the effect of gestational diabetes on human milk hormones
Yes.
and how the change in the human milk would impact the impact of urinary life.
Wow. Very good. A good group. That group, a great group. Well done.
My name is Amr. I'm doing a master's degree in genetics and genomics. This is my last semester.
Okay. And what's your plan after this?
Hopefully PhD.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, in natural product discovery.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. My brother's in that game. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
My brother and I are quite contrasting in the sense he's much more in the private business side of science. And so he doesn't talk about what he does other than the odd occasion where he tells me, you know, he's done more HPLCs in a week than any human on earth or something like that, stealing medications from trees, shall we say. So yes, interesting.
My name is Ahmad, and I'm from Saudi Arabia.
And a plan? Maybe. Yeah, you don't have to be saying that, please. You know, I'm from here, but I know others. We have other world life things to do. So you're all right. You relax. I know a little of your story. Go on.
I think I'm enjoying the last degree. My name is Hamdan Al-Mahdi from Saudi Arabia as well. I'm doing the critical care partnership for my institute. This is part of it.
Before we started, we just had a discussion about how I could not do paramedicine. I would be the worst paramedic. Well, I wouldn't sign up, to be honest. I wouldn't even sign up. So, but thank you for what you do. Thank you.
Everyone who's starting a new job. And then after that, it will be.
Anyway.
My name is Nazir. I live in PhD and Salt Lake with one from ST. So that's all.
Oh, come on. What are you doing it on? Don't say it. That's all.
Like using the accessibility to public health.
Yes.
Care sectors in Australia. We are going to locate the tertiary hospitals here in the capital cities and the top most populated cities in Australia, and then compare it internationally with selected cities such as France, Paris in France, and London, and Toronto in Canada, and Kuala-Lumpur in Malaysia.
Yes. And, you know, as we talked on Friday, just to give a bit more positive to that story, because that was a bit... Clearly, in a pandemic, when there are countries putting tents outside their EDs because they're not adequately capacitated, this is an important piece of work to be done to actually understand how volume and networks around hotspots and things. So, you know, a really important piece of work. Good.
My name is Han, and I'm originally from China. And my major, I heard about pretty much everybody from the field of computer science or health science. I'm in between of the middle combination because my background is computer science, but I want to be a biostatistician. So my master's thesis is currently under examination. I am the prospective PhD student at UW here. My application is under review by GRS right now. The reason I come to this workshop because I'm currently a casual academic tutor at ECU. I want to improve my teaching skill, and that's why, the workshop comes up, and I'm happy to come over here. Thank you.
Good. Fantastic.
Hi, my name is Adam. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I'm a PhD student. I'm currently studying my field is hydrographic science or hydrographic surveying. If I start explaining the hydrographic, I have to the whole day.
Yes, that's right.
And that's it.
Okay, fantastic. Water. What an important thing. You know, we're going to have troubles in this world with water.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Mohammed Garda. I'm originally from the same country, almost boys and girls. So from Saudi Arabia.
Not Brazil.
This is first year for me here. So because
Welcome.
I'm first student, I'm doing Master of Biological Sciences.
Yes.
Specialization is conservation biology.
Conservation biology, fantastic. Wow. I'm glad you two sat next to each other. We need water and we need plants. You know? Otherwise we're really not well here, are we, as a planet, without you? Very good. Very good. Moss, you should tell your story too.
Musa from Saudi Arabia, and I'm a PhD in digital public health.
Go on, tell what you're doing.
Yeah.
Don't point at me.
I'm doing my research in assisting the dental health sector in my region in Saudi Arabia. So now I'm my supervisor as well, Mark. So thank you also. I want to thank you for giving us your
No, it's a pleasure. It's like, no, you don't have to thank me. I think, you know what? I think both ends of this team are having wins. For me, it's been a really wonderful month to actually have something concrete to think about, and I love doing these, so that's cool. Thank you. All right, and if I go off track, please, someone tell me stop. We need to stop for some lunch or whatever we need to do, so just keep me on track. I wanted to start, this session we're going to talk mainly about curriculum planning, because one of the things I felt that I was completely naive to, I thought you turned up and when someone said, congratulations, you're teaching a course on dental anatomy, I'd just sit down with a piece of paper and write out the topics, or I'd get the topics there ready to teach. I had no idea that there's all of this other stuff that you need to think about before you get your pen on the paper. So what I want to do is I want to make sure people... you need to plug that in, do you? You can borrow that. There you go. So what I want to do is I want to make sure people get a grasp on all the stuff that sits above when you sit down to make up that timetable. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks in the second half of the day, how to do this without thinking about all of these problems, but to try and keep them in the back of your mind. So that's where I'm going to start, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about these things. Are things you would never have thought impacts on building a curriculum. You sit down, you write a lecture topic down, you think that you're all right. You've got to think about all of these things behind it. What's the government? You're sitting there probably thinking, the government has nothing to do with what I teach in my dental anatomy program. Well, it does. So I want to talk about the government's influence. I want to talk about how, and I'll give you the slides. Please don't sit there writing the slides down. I give everything away. So we'll give you the slides. I want to also then spend some time talking about academic professional courses. Now, for some of you, paramedicine, a wonderful example. It will have an accrediting body of the Paramedics Board of Australia or something. I don't know what it's called, something. AHPRA, you're under AHPRA as well, but there will be a group who will set out some rules. So many professional courses, education. There's a board that determines what you should have in your course. So I want to talk about how that impacts, and I've given you two examples in the little packet that I gave you. I gave you the Medical Board of Australia and the Dental Board of Australia and what their accreditation standards look like. I want to spend a few minutes just looking at them as examples. But can I warn you? Architecture, engineering, anything under AHPRA. More and more disciplines are having professional standards now. So if you think you're going to escape it in hydrology, no. At the end of the day, something will come along that will set some standards for what a hydrology program will need to have in it. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Physical constraints. It's a classic. I remember when I first started out, I had this, I call it bright starry eyes. Oh yes, we're going to teach dental anatomy and we're going to have, 16, plastic dental heads. I had this grand idea of how I wanted to teach it, and then someone said to me, Mark, they're $4,000 each. And you went, I get it. So I want to talk about, think about the constraints. This is sort of upside down in a way. Don't think about the topics, think about the constraints first, and then work your topics into the constraints. Human constraints. That's a classic problem, isn't it? How many people can you ask to come and help you do the teaching? If you need small group teaching, let's imagine you're doing, 10 labs of 10 students, can you get enough people with the skills to help you do that teaching? Now, for some disciplines, you'd say, well, that's easy. But it's not so easy at times, you know. You have to rely, often in disciplines, you rely on practitioners out in society coming in to do a session of teaching. Or you rely on PhD students. Everyone here, I suspect, is probably doing a wee bit of teaching somewhere, or probably. You know, you rely upon them coming in. You know, maybe they're going to finish their course and leave. What are you going to do then? So you've got to think through all that human resource piece. Come in. And I always laugh about the next one, dollar constraints.
Dollar constraints
in different countries at different times. So come in, don't be shy, you're fine. Different times, different countries, dollar constraints are different. You know, I've worked in one place where I got into trouble for not spending enough. Now for me in Australia, that's like, you know, I'm so used to working in a higher education sector where you haven't got the centimes to spend, let alone the dollars to spend. So I'm always looking at how can I keep it cheaper, to then get into trouble because, like, you only want one of them, why don't you get one of these? Or, you know. So it's different in different places, but dollar constraints are always there. And I think it's becoming more and more so in higher education. So I want to talk through some of that. And then the last thing is quite important to me. The last couple of weeks I've not been so well, so it's actually impacted on me. It's only been added in the last couple of weeks. So the sustainability. What happens if you suddenly decide you're going to go and do something else? Will your course continue on without you? Now at first, many times, people go, well, I hope not, it's my course. Actually, no, it's not. It's the program's course. So, you know, despite you having personal mental ownership of it, which is a very common thing to do, and I do it with all my courses. If someone suddenly turned up and said, I'm teaching advanced topics, the thing I teach on Wednesday mornings, you know, we're going to give that to someone else to teach, I would be very upset. I would be angry, I would be destroying my PowerPoints, I'd be, you know, tossing my computer in the rubbish bin, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's far nicer, can I tell you from personal experience, it's far nicer to go back to an institution 15 years later and go, oh, that's my course still running. So that sustainability is actually something you will get far more joy out of than scorched earth as you leave. Find a way to get joy from that. I think I've told you this story. About 5 years ago, a person from a computing centre in one of the dental hospitals in Australia was in my office and said, oh, you know, look, he only knew me as Mark. And he was in my office. I goes, oh no, you know, look, we've got this software that's core to our dental hospital running, you know, and I've been told I need to rewrite. They said, you know a bit about dental, we'll come and talk to you. I said, oh yeah, that's interesting. I said, where's this software from, or what is it? And they said, oh, well, some bloke, Tennant, wrote it. That's my surname. And sure enough, it was software I'd written 15 years ago for this dental hospital. It was still in place and operating. Should have been destroyed years ago, way too long. But to see your own thing, or to see your history still there and present and working, it is actually really good. So you have to overcome the scorched earth sensation. So that was my next thing. Cool. Government. Let's talk about that first. You might not know, but every course you're doing in any university you're in at the moment is governed by this thing called TEQSA. Every time we design a course, or your PhDs, all have to fit the rules that TEQSA set. I can't sit down and make up a new PhD program and go, come and enrol in my course. Because they tell me what I can do. And they give me a registration number for that course, well not me, the university, a registration number for that course of exactly what is in it. So you have to get it approved by the government. That's irrespective of the discipline. That's everything from TAFE. Does TEXA? I don't think TEXA does TAFE. I think another group does TAFE. But from TAFE all the way through to PhDs.
Is it only WA? Or?
This is nationwide. But you know, I've seen the same in Malaysia, certainly in Singapore, in Hong Kong. So there will be, I'll bet you, there will be some Department of Higher Education. People are nodding. Is that true? In Saudi?
Yeah, we have the same.
You have the same. You have some organisation that sits on top.
Organization is academic accreditation.
Academic accreditation. Yeah, yeah. And Brazil, I think Brazil has. I've seen it. Yes. So every country has this sort of system. Universities are not like the old days. They can't just make a course up on their own. They need to fit these rules. And these rules are very specific. Please, I haven't put it in your pack because it's better to go on the website. But go and have a look at the standards that these people set, because the standards are the same as I've seen elsewhere in the world as well. You know, there's standards about, the best one I can give you. A person who's got a bachelor's degree can't teach master's students, for example. So that influences who's allowed to teach what. That's, you know what, we're all sitting here, well, that sort of makes logical sense. You've got to at least have the education level of what you're teaching or more. Like the hierarchic system, yes. So, you know, it makes logical sense. So most of their standards, they're not crazy. They're fairly logical things that the society expects of you. But you do have to check. So when your time comes to make a course, get the rules out. Have a look and just make sure before you jump that you meet that. Otherwise, someone in your university, I'll give you a tip. This mark tip number 1. There's always someone in the university left responsible for making sure every course meets these. So one day you'll get a phone call, Emil, how come you're teaching this and you haven't got, you know, a staff member with a master's degree as your casual teacher? You go, I didn't know. Well, that can be catastrophic, so don't do that. Actually read the rules. So have a little read before you start designing your course. Most of the cases, certainly the one in Singapore that I've read, most of these are written in sort of lay language. They're not technical. The standards are not designed to be only readable by vice chancellors or something. These are actually, the government makes these, so politicians build these so the community can have assurance. So yep, please, go and look at the TEXA. Really important. Yeah.
So when you say course, that's under the program, like for the whole.
Yeah, what a great question, Emil. And this is a linguistics thing, and all of us have different. You want to have a laugh? In Victoria versus Western Australia, they use the words differently. So even in one state, or even better, Victoria, New South Wales, and there's a place I worked where there's just a little river between Victoria and New South Wales. On one side of the river, you have to use the word course to mean one thing, and on the other side of the river, you have to use the word course to. There's no standard here. So for today, what I'm going to use is the generic program means medical degree. And course means anatomy of the leg. Okay? In this place, it's usually subject. It used to be unit. That's the first thing you probably need to get a handle on is what words does everyone use, because you'll see it in their accreditation documents. So yeah, that differs all over the planet. So I wish there was a simple, unified answer. When I'm king of Earth, that'll be on my first day, I'll do that. So yeah, a bit of a problem, Matt. So the words are tricky. They move. Just to give you a little laugh, in that same Albury-Wodonga is the town's name. in that same place. On one side of the river, dental hygienists, they're a mid-level dental provider, could inject local anaesthetic, but if they walked the 10 yards over the river, it was illegal. Like, you know, some really strange things happen when you get different jurisdictions and stuff, so some crazy world stuff, you know, crazy. Anyway, back on track. Please, make sure you meet the government guidelines when you start thinking about a course. The problem is going to come about when you start to give online courses. We haven't come to that solution yet. You know, let's imagine you're a person in a different country doing a degree from an Australian university fully online. Well, at the moment you have to meet the accrediting standards of TEQSA because the course is based in Australia. But you can see down your journey of life, this is on the column on your page, what's going to happen to me, what am I going to have to face? You're going to have to face all of this stuff becoming global as opposed to sitting here in Western Australia and meeting these rules. So just be aware of that. It's not going to be so simple for you. I thought it was hard for me. Any other questions on the government? Yes?
I would like to know about how often the government evaluate the course or the school or whatever. It come over to school and come to the university. They sit there and then maybe say you pass the accreditation or not.
Yes.
How often they?
Yes. TEQSA, I think it's about every 7 years.
Every 7 years.
But certainly one university in Australia has had some providers 3 years. And I think you have to give a written report once a year, you know, assuring the government that you are working within what you said you were doing. They are pretty tough. So yes, you have to meet it. So yes, they do come and check on you. They're probably not as checking as the professional groups that I'll come to next. They're probably a little bit more distant than the medical council, for example, or the engineering council or something. But they still do come and check, yes. And all governments will be doing that. So please just have a look wherever you are. They will be coming. And I'll talk about the medical one in a minute. It's quite interesting how that works. Any other questions? We good? Cool, that's the government. And then, and I've given you both of these documents. I've given you the standards for dental and for medicine. We're going to stop for a minute so we can actually sit and have a look through them because I want you to actually have a serious look at them. Not about the content. Who cares? None of you are going to be doctors. Maybe you will. Anyway, you don't care. Don't care of the content. I want you to look at the structure of how they're arranged because that's really important. You know, standards and the criterion and all that sort of stuff and the rules set around it, how specific they get. So we're going to have a stop in a minute. We're going to each have a look at some of these. They are highly specific, can I tell you? They will ask you, do you have a social work service to support your students? Essential things, you know, I'm not arguing against it, but I'm just saying, once you start looking at the criteria in these are quite tough. And they will check on you. And they also have systems for anonymous whistleblowers. So if a student thinks they're not getting a fair deal, they can phone up. They have systems for staff to make, you know, I thought I was teaching anatomy for 400 hours in a year, but my dean has just told me, no, you can do that in 10. You can phone up and go, wait. So these organisations are there to ensure standards and the safety of communities. clearly. An engineer who doesn't know, well, a mechanical engineer who doesn't know, who didn't do the unit in bridge physics is not a mechanical engineer. We don't want them building bridges. So, you know, clearly they're going to be checking to make sure things are done. So these bodies, and they're becoming more and more. So I think we should have a look and have a think. Even though they're not in your discipline, they will be coming to your discipline. Okay. So I think, has everyone got the handouts? What about you guys? Have a look at the medical ones. Do you guys want to look at the medical ones? Everyone got them? Have you got them on your laptop?
Yeah, it's a zip file and a few,
Yeah, it's a zip file. So it's inside the zip file is professional standards. I gave the medical and the dental. What about you guys look at the dental ones, because you're not dental. I think doing that on purpose, because if these guys, what's wrong? You guys, why don't you guys look at the dental one too? You can help your colleagues. Have a look, and just have a look at how they're set up. Read the introduction and how they're set up, standards, criteria, and just read a few so you can see the depth that these are at. These are significant. Where's my glasses? Yeah, I'll just get my glasses. Hang on, I need these.
I heard about something before ECU. Some of the makeup of the agreement and all the students have to transform from these makers to another one. So that does happen now. Have you done it here before or?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know of any that have had. Now, normally what happens is 99% of the time what happens is one of these groups will come in and say, listen, your course is lacking in this area, or you need to fix this, you've got 2 years to fix it.
Oh,
or something like that. Normally they give recommendations and you have to work to repair.
Yeah.
So it's very rare for them to go stop the bus. So I've heard it only a few times.
Yeah.
Certainly I haven't heard it here. But yes, normally it's a process of doing repair.
Improvement.
Improvement.
Yeah.
That's the one. They're not sort of like the police, it's more improvement.
Yeah.
So yeah, please have a look at the medical one.
Sure.
Have a look.
Okay. I'm not from the
You know him?
Yeah. I work here.
There's no rule. It's fine.
I think all the
What about I ask, have you guys seen some of them? Have you looked at a couple? Just getting started. Okay. You guys have looked at a couple. Read a couple of the criteria out, just so people can see the level. Just read them out, even if you don't know what they mean.
Like all these?
Yeah, just pick a couple out.
Like we pick patients consent to care by students.
Say that like that?
Patients consent to be cared by students.
Yes, there's a good one. So that organisation, is that medical or dental?
This is the dental one.
That's the dental one. The dental one is saying that all patients must have consent to be treated by a student. Must give consent to be treated by a student. Now, how would they check that? Well, they will come, when they come for their visit, and they're more regular than 7 years, when they come for their visit, they're going to go, show me 10 patient records, and in it you'll need to have written, patient consented to care. You can see how tough this gets. This is down at the, this is far more down in the content than the text up in the government. Read another one out. Any random one. Read another one.
So all students are registered with the relevant regulatory authorities.
Yes, there's another good one. All students are registered with the relevant authorities. Something like that. But that's really important. For example, in the cases we're talking here, taking x-rays. If you're not registered with the x-ray department, they have different names, different places, then you would be breaking the law. So you can see these are quite specific. Did you guys do the medical? Have you had a look at all?
Yeah, we just
Can you read a couple of your criteria? Any other one?
A statement of the intent and objective, content, assessment, experience, outcome, and process of program, including description of the structure and the expected method of learning,
Yes.
feedback, and supervision.
Wow. So this is, it's well worth having a look. I put the two, the medical and dental one, up because they are subtly different. The medical one is much more broad. They ask more broader things. Please ensure that you're using contemporary education practices and good assessment, wasn't it? Something like that, in summary. So you can see that theirs are much broader than the specific yes-no ones of this. So please, do have a look at these. Now, why am I talking about this now? Because when you are designing let's imagine you're just designing a subject, a course. If your course is, for example, teaching local anaesthetic, you know, you better know what criteria they're going to come and check on when they come in 3 years' time. You've been teaching it for 3 years, and if you ain't meeting their criteria and it's 3 years late, that's a mistake. So that's why make sure when you're about to sit down and design your course, you look at that. And I'm going to show you a methodology of building a course that makes sure you check all these things off. Okay? Professional standards. We good? I bet you never thought that would be needed before you started. You just go, you'd only think of that when the Dean rang you up. Okay. So I'm going to talk about all these three things together. I'm going to talk about all of this stuff: physical constraints, human constraints, dollar constraints. We're going to wrap this into one bucket because it's important, but
all interlinked. So I'm just going to call them like that. I recommend.
This is from a very long while ago. This is in fact one of the first diagrams I ever drew. It sat stapled to my board above my computer in my home, in my study at home, when I very first started teaching. It was all drawn in pencil and texting, it was old days. And then we published it. What it is a map of all the things that influence building a curriculum. So when you go into a new institution to start teaching, I would give you my tip number 2 on Mark's list of tips. Make a map of all the influences so you don't forget any. Just draw it and keep adding to it. This is like version 300. You know, the first one was like 2 or 3 things. But have a look. This was dental, for example. Would you have ever thought consumables and supplies would be an influence on your curriculum? Well, of course it is. Think about it for a minute. If you're doing a practical class and the things that you need for that practical class have a 12-week wait time before they arrive, and you've been given the class with a week's notice or something, well, forget it. It's not going to work, is it? So, you know, all I recommend, and don't look at mine, but build your own. Sit down and just with a pen and a paper, talk to the other people in the school. Hey, you know, is there enough casual staff? You know, what do you think? Is there going to be people who can teach in my... Oh, no, the Dean, I've had this happen. The Dean's given you this because there isn't any. You're going to have to teach the whole lot yourself. So your thought plan of how you're going to do all these labs suddenly falls apart because one of these elements is not present. So please, that's my first tip. Second tip. Draw a map so you know what's going on in your school. Draw a map so you can understand the influences on what makes you able to do a curriculum. This one is clustered into, I think it's in 4 parts actually. I think I've got academic influences up the top. Yeah, casual staff. Look, pay. Where have I got it there somewhere? HR system pays. If you've got casual staff and the HR department takes 10 weeks to pay them and then gets it wrong, you're not going to have casual staff for very long. So, you know, how good is your HR department actually influences how you're going to make your course to be sustainable and stable and good. And everyone's smiling because they all not good on the whole. In fact, I always share the story. I started out as an employee of this university and had to wait 3 months before I got my first paycheck because I couldn't organise it. So I worked for 3 months. What else? You know, you look at this, things you would not think about. Patience. In this case, are there enough patients? Are there enough patients with the problem that you want to teach to correct? There's no point in saying we'll have 500 dental students but there's no patients who need fillings. Dentist needs to know how to do filling. What's the point? So all of this stuff. So please, for me in my life, that was a huge thing. To have this little map slowly evolving on my wall at home made my teaching better and stronger and stable, because I would just make sure I wasn't at risk in any of these boxes, in a sense. Good. So constraints, really important stuff. Yeah, make a map, guys. Make a map. And the map is never stable, is it? You know, if you think about those boxes, Malaysia, great example. In Malaysia, during the global financial crisis, the currency valuation dipped dramatically. And so because they were buying consumables and things from the United States, all of a sudden the consumables became unaffordable. So clearly, if I was drawing this map for a school or a course in Malaysia, I would put that sort of stuff on there. You are at risk of those sorts of things. Build a map. Tip number 3. Mark's tip number 3. And this is really important. This one is actually getting to the practicality now of how do you actually write out that list. Because really, that's all you know, a course is just a list, isn't it? It's just like what topics I'm going to do each week. This is a way to think about it. This is a method. You have the paper, by the way. I've given you, I think in the collection I've given you 3 papers. It's fairly self-indulgent. I apologise that I just picked my own, but I was reflecting on my own life. So it's not that there would be not other good ones out there. One of the papers, I think I called it 4 dimensions, is that previous diagram. So read about that. The second paper is called KIM, C-I-M, Curriculum Information Models. This is what I call a KIM. Things called Building Information Models in Architecture and Building Management, and a BIM, as they're called, is fundamentally a complete simulation of a building so you can manage the air conditioning correctly for the correct day and all these sorts of things, and it manages the design process and everything. So I went to some talks about architects and buildings, and I heard of BIMs, and I thought that's exactly the same problem we have when we need to design a curriculum. So I wrote that paper called KIMS. Curriculum information models fundamentally say, let's make sure as we write down what we're doing that we keep all the links tied together. The L stands for links on this. For example,
I was reflecting on my own life, so it's not that there would be not other good ones out there. One of the papers, I think I call it 4 dimensions, is that previous diagram, so read about that. The second paper is called KIM, C-I-M, Curriculum Information Models. This is what I call a KIM. Now please, I didn't think that up. There's these things called Building Information Models in Architecture and Building Management, and a BIM, as they're called, is fundamentally a complete simulation of a building so you can manage the air conditioning correctly for the correct day and all these sorts of things, and it manages the design process and everything. So I went to some talks about architects and buildings, and I heard of BIMs, and I thought that's exactly the same problem we have when we need to design a curriculum. So I wrote that paper called KIMS. Curriculum information models fundamentally say, let's make sure as we write down what we're doing that we keep all the links tied together. The L stands for links on this. For example, professional accreditation. Where's that somewhere here? Oh, even better, graduate skills. See over on this side, second from the top, is graduate skills. Every university has a set of graduate skills. Our graduates will, and then there's usually 4 or 5 things. Be good at adding up. Well, I made that up, but you know what I mean. Be good at critical problem solving. ... When that happens, you need, as you build your subject, as you build your subject, you need to have them linked to your subject. Because one day, someone from the central command is going to come down and say, "Oi, how is your subject addressing the issues of the graduate outcomes?" And you've got two choices. Either you sit there and go, "Well, I didn't even know we had graduate outcomes." That was me the first time that was me. Or you go, "No worries, I've got this little map that shows that that graduate outcome is related to these bits that I'm teaching here, and here, and this one relates to these." You need a little linkage map. And then you go to the professional, the themes, you go to all the different things. Down here you've got student resources. What student resources do I need to link to my subject? What are the textbooks I need to link to? Are the textbooks in the bookshop? All those sorts of things. So this and that paper, and please, that paper, if in 1988, when I gave my first lecture, someone had written that paper and given it to me, it would have been like, "Oh, I actually understand what I'm doing now." So I'll give it to you to go read it now, because if you use something like that, you will make a great subject that no one in your university will ever like to do this. Yeah.
Just want to ask, which one should this actually have like brain course? Starting point, which one should it?
Yes, where to start? Can I tell you, I'm going to show you exactly how I would do it. So you hold on, we're putting all the blocks on the page, and then I'm going to say, this is where I'd start. And I'll be honest with you, what I would start with doing, just so you know up front, I would get all these lists of these different things. I would get the accreditation standards, I'd get the government standards, I'd get the graduate skills, I'd just have them on all those little lists stuck on my desk or something, and then I'd sit down and start to write out my course and go, "Ah, yes, that links to that and that." And in a sense, I just do little bits of string to tie them all together. So that's a summary of how I would do it. At the end of the... You know what? It was a great question, because that's exactly how you end up with all this stuff. And I regularly end up in the same boat. You've made something simple look so hard all of a sudden. How do you get started? So we will get to that. But good. So this is just to say how you link everything up. And I think my next two pictures summarise it nicely. Yeah, here we go. I've tried to leave it reasonably blurry so you can't actually read the content. I don't want you to read the content. I don't care. I don't even know what subject it is. And it's in the paper, so you can have a look yourself. But basically what you can see, if you look here, this says year outcomes. Okay, this bit up here says year outcomes. And this bit is learning outcomes. And if you look... Oh, that's all right, I'm happy with a pen. Yeah. Thank you, but I'll do it with a pen. This learning outcome here is linked to those 2 year outcomes. 124 and 125. So you look here, it's linked to 124 and 125. So this learning outcome will address year outcome 124 and 125. This learning outcome will address the same two, 125 and 125. This last two here, 124, 125. This one will address 1 and 125. The top one and the bottom one. So that is how the learning outcomes are linked to the year outcomes. And then this column links it to the course outcomes. Remember, a subject has a little bunch of, and above it is a course, and then above it is the University Generic Skills. So by sitting down and just drawing your map like this, you can do it any way you like. This is just the way I do it. You will then know how all ties together. Okay? And that's really important. So, you know, for you it's important, but much more important is your boss. And your university will go, no, thank you. I'm not going to get into trouble from the accrediting body because I know that this bit of what Mark's teaching here ties into everything that we expect in the course and what the governing body expects and things. So that's why you do this map and tree. Okay? Down here, another classic example here, this is the assessment, down the bottom here. Assessment. Practical exercises is linked to learning outcome 349. So look down into this here, there. So this assessment will cover off that learning outcome. You can't have a piece of assessment that's not related to what you're teaching. You all sit here and go, well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? No, stop telling us silly things. But can you prove it? If you do a mapping exercise like this, you can make sure that every single learning outcome is hit, let's say, by an assessment. And your boss will never get cranky at you then. And your students won't. How nice is it for students to see this? Could you imagine? Students can just sit back and go, oh, well, that makes sense. He's teaching this, and it's going to be in this assessment, but it's not going in that assessment. It just makes life transparent and easy. So this is, I would call it curriculum mapping or such like, but this is that linkage piece. I'll just go back for a minute. All that was doing was practically, here we go, subjects had a sequence of learning outcomes in it, and those learning outcomes were linked to the assessment, which had a weighting. So the second picture I've just shown you is actually this in practical terms, how to do it. So, yeah?
So, meeting this criteria, is it a job of one person who designed the curriculum, or is it like...
That's a great question. That's a wonderful question. Do you know what? The formal answer is no. You should be putting all the course, becoming a doctor, all the course should be sitting in a room and doing this all together. That would be nice if you were the boss, wouldn't it? When you become the boss, you do that. When you're a dean, you do that. But the reality is, it's never going to happen, is it? No. So then it becomes, you do it to protect yourself. So my answer is, you do it for your own little piece, so you know you're okay. You know that when the government inspector comes, he ain't going to be looking at you, he's going to be looking at someone else. So that's why I do it like, that's why I teach to everyone, because I reckon some of you will become deans one day and you'll get your whole school to do it together, but the reality is you should do it for each of your little pieces on your own. Okay? And you know the other thing it does? If you do it in this manner, it makes you make sure that you cover everything in the course. You actually think about it and go, oh yeah, I should do something that does critical problem solving because that's a graduate skill. Do my learning outcomes actually do something that is critical problem solving? It actually makes you rethink the list you're going to build. It makes you think about, am I addressing what the world wants of you? The professional body says, please make sure you teach all medical students with different types of assessment. That's cool. But when you look at your exit point data and you go, how many types of assessment do I have there? Have I just done written exams for everything? That was in my day. It was part of my course. my dental degree would not have passed today. So, you know, you've got to be prepared for that. So diversity in this space here for medical programs, for example. So that's why I show you this, to get the linkage together. And at the end of the day, this is the other piece. This is looking at those words in a map, in a sense. Here are the learning outcomes, and does it address the different year outcomes? So by doing a map like this, you can actually now see, oh look, this is a good one because this had to go to accreditation. I took this from an accreditation document, so obviously it's been made to be good. If you imagine when you did it and you found nothing in this column, let's imagine those two dots weren't there. That tells you, hey listen, hold on, this course outcome is not being addressed in anywhere in the course, which you can't have. Okay? So making maps like this are really valuable to make sure you cover off all the rules that we need to meet. That's why we're doing this. We good? So, at the essence of this problem, let's go back for a moment. Oops, wrong one. At the essence of this problem, there's a subject and a bunch of learning outcomes. What we're going to do is we're going to sit for a while and we're going to, oh, it is good. So I'll talk for 5 minutes, with 12:30 was not. Yes. I'll talk for 5 minutes and then you can think about it over lunch and then we're going to come back and actually do it. Okay? At the core, and I've forgotten your name again. Miriam raised the really practical question, well, how do I get started? I'll change it. At the core of getting started is writing a learning outcome. What do I want to achieve in my subject? I'll give you a rule. No subject has more than 5. Do not write more than 5 learning outcomes for any subject, ever. Finish. So you need 5 learning outcomes that covers off what your subject is about. So the first step, step 1, is get all these rules on bits of paper around you. Step 2, sit down and write the learning outcomes. In this course, I want to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's some rules around. There's some rules around writing learning outcomes. I'm just going to share with you the rules for the last 5 minutes. This is the rules. A learning outcome has to start with a verb. That's pretty simple. A verb, like explain. You guys are all sitting here now thinking back through your courses. Oh yeah, the learning outcomes I'll give in my course always start with something like that. Contrast, complete, correlate, plan. A learning outcome always has that in it, a verb. But the verbs are rated. The verbs are rated in the cognitive capacity that you need to acquire. So for complicated courses, master's level courses or third-year university courses, most of the verbs should be up this end of the scale from these sorts of words. For courses at the beginning of your university career, like first-year courses, probably more from down the lower end of the scale. So this is called Bloom's taxonomy. But basically it clusters the words that are the core words of learning outcomes into a hierarchy of lower level activity versus higher level activity. Now you might have a subject that has 2 learning outcomes from down here and 3 learning outcomes from up here. That's okay, there's no rules, but for higher level courses, master's level for example, actually you can check, you can test, because I've given you some course outcome. I gave you 3 course learning guides for 3 courses. I've given you a super short, crazy, ridiculously easy one. I think it runs 1.5 pages. I've given you a middle level one, and I've given you one that runs 57 pages or something like that. And so you can see low, medium and high in terms of a learning guide. But you look at the learning outcomes in it, that's going to be your mission in a minute, you look at the learning outcomes in it, and you will see which category or which level of verbs they have. So that's the first piece of getting started. You write learning outcomes and you write them with the appropriate verb in them. So, what we're going to do, you're actually going to take this course today, and I want you to write down, it's only short, so I want you to write 3 learning outcomes for today. Okay? Now, clearly we're at graduate
level. So, it's going to be probably, the majority is going to be up this end of the scale. So after lunch when we come back, that's going to be the plan. We're going to write some learning outcomes for this course. Not just today's session, but for the 4 sessions. I'll put the session key back up. Over lunch you can have a talk and a think about it and whatever, and when we come back we'll write those learning outcomes as step 1 in how to build a course. How's that sound? Yes. Yes.
I think also these steps should be measurable. For example, I think when we write to know something, to let students know something, this is something we can't measure this outcome. I think this will be rejected.
Absolutely. They have to be measurable. Correct. Now, measurable is a tricky problem, isn't it? Because in some cases, measurable is easy. You can do it by multiple choice or something like that. But once you get up to this end, measurable becomes a more, not discretionary, more, yeah, it's more of an abstract thing, you know. Down here, memorise. All right, I can do that. There were 10 things you needed to memorise. You only got 6 in the exam, 6 out of 10. That's simple. But once you go up here, it becomes a little harder to be measurable, but you do need to have some measures on them. So certainly, and that links back to this, doesn't it? The learning outcomes all need to be linked to endpoints, to exit points, to assessment. So yes, you need it measurable at assessment time. So when you're writing your learning outcomes, have a think. You've got to make sure that they are measurable learning outcomes. All right, let's stop. Enjoy some fresh air. Get outside.
Yeah, we have lunch.
Oh, you have some lunch. Wow, you guys are well looked after. Come and have some lunch.
Okay. Before we get on to the learning outcomes, before we get on to writing those learning outcomes, there's a few things that come up over lunch that people have asked me, but I thought we'd go through because they're really good questions. The first was but Mark, in my uni, when I turn up, they give me the subject with the learning outcomes already there. Well, I'll give you a little tick here. You're at a good university. That is not always the case. Many places you will turn up and they will give you the title of the subject and the little one paragraph. This subject will cover this, this and this. And then it's left to you to design underneath that. So if you're given the full learning outcomes and everything, you just have to fit in, count yourself lucky. Now what I suspect will happen though, most people it happens to, you'll look at them and go, I wouldn't do it like this. I want this in it. You know, I think this is more important. Because we all have different perspectives on the same material. And that's okay. If that happens to you, you just look at the learning outcomes, go which one you wanted to change or modify, and go and talk to your next level, the boss, and say, you know, hey, listen, this learning outcome really is not what I want to do, and see if you can change. Now that does raise the problem of changing learning outcomes in a course. Sometimes there's governance over that. Sometimes you can make little changes or subtle changes, but if you want to change it dramatically,
it needs to go through hierarchies of checks. So it might take time. So if you look at your learning outcomes and you turn up and you go, I want all of these changed dramatically, get straight onto your boss early, is the answer to that question. The next one that came up was, I just lost it out of my head. No, it's gone. The third one that came up was a question, which is a really good question. Let's imagine you had a topic like GIS, something close to not only your heart, all of our hearts. But you had a class that had master's level students. You had to teach a GIS class for master's level student and a GIS class for undergraduates. Can you just use the one class guide? It's sort of not exactly your question, but sort of. No. Your governance systems won't permit that because they will expect that in the master's level program you will be much more advanced. And can I give you the tip, having had to do it myself, to teaching different class groups in the one class on different pathways, different sets of learning outcome, it's just personally impossible. I have never been able to do that successfully. It's much better, even if you have to work a bit harder, to break the classes into two separate pieces and do them separately. Because this issue of the level becomes a real problem. The level you will teach GIS for master's students will not be the same level. You know that naturally. You will teach to a higher level. Half of them will come to you and go, yeah, but you taught me that when I was an undergrad. And you just go, oh no, I did too. You know, you have to teach it differently. So I never recommend, and some universities are trying this at the moment, to save money, we'll put everyone in the class together and we'll teach the whole lot. Great example. At one university, they tried to put podiatry, dentistry, science and medical students all in the one room to teach them anatomy. So you'd be teaching 3 weeks or 4 weeks of foot anatomy and the dental students would be going, why am I learning about feet? I'm a head person. And then you'd teach 3 weeks of head and the podiatry people would be going, why are you teaching me about head? I'm a foot person. And the medical students are going, but I'm going to be a neurosurgeon. Why are you teaching me about the muscles of the face? My recommendation to everyone, wherever you go, don't get into that. It just gets too hard and too messy. Okay, so does that answer the question? Yeah. Keep the different groups separate, even if it means you feel like you're teaching twice. Okay? Still didn't come back to me, the second thing. Anyway, it'll come at some point. Right, the mission now is yes.
If the students who undergrad and postgraduate study the same subject, that's possible to have in one class as well. Because I do see some universities that will reject them to have a credit
Yes. Extraordinarily hard to do. Extraordinarily hard to do. If you are teaching the one, if you are got a class and you are teaching the one quantum of material to them, and then you assess this group differently to this group, I think arguments will fall out of that. I think this group will say, but you never taught me that, or you never taught it at that level. This group are going, oh, this is too... You know. I think that gets into really difficult land. But I am absolutely with you in that universities are trying to do that, to scale up, to be economic. I don't believe in it. I don't think there's economics in it, in a sense. What I would say is, let's imagine there's core material that both groups need. GIS. Everyone needs to know about coordinate reference systems in GIS. So I would make some online learning materials around coordinate reference systems and give it to both groups. But then I would take this group off and give them something higher level, while this group just finished with that. Okay? So I think you need to work away, and I think online learning gives you an opportunity to work that solution out. The generic material can be online, and you give higher level stuff to this group, and you'll give just the generic to this group. Something like that. I've never seen it work out successfully. I've seen it end in tears. For me, ending in tears means appeals to vice-chancellors for, failed course. Any other questions? That's a good one. Because universities are putting that pressure on us all. Me too. We good? Right, the mission is, I want you to write me learning outcomes for this course. This is the content of the course. We're doing it. I want you to turn this into learning outcomes, 4 or 5 learning outcomes, recognising that we are over there in the taxonomy. Okay? So sit and have a go. You can do it within your group, that's fine, sort of thing, and then we'll spend 10 minutes doing that, and then we'll share what we achieve from it. Now, it's not too bad because, and I was saying to this group, I was laughing. Look at the first one. 30 years of doing this turns you into a verb man. I've already started you off on the journey, so you can just take it and tweak the words to make it work into a learning outcome.
The fourth one, I was thinking maybe
exactly right. That's right. For this one I was going to use plan, the verb plan, plan, assessment and marking rubrics are at 2, ... I was thinking up that far end again, because this is high-end stuff. Secondary culture for positive experiences. I was going to say people do evaluate or understand, but understand is a low way down there. Evaluate, appraise, think something like that. Giving great lectures, shockingly worded, in good English. And one failure I always have with writing my accounts, I end up getting stuck on the same word in all 5 of them. So immediately in my head I went to prepare. It's like, well, I've used that 3 times already. So, but something like that in this one. What I would have done, that you probably none of you thought, was I would have put one above it that is a much wider contextual thing. Be able to critically appraise contemporary educational methods. Or I would have put something above it that is a very wide principle of what we're trying to achieve. And if I'm trying to write that, I often look at the title of the subject I have and go, well, what's the intent of this title? GIS for deep ocean mining. So I would look at a big, wider, understand the issues faced by mining in deep oceans, or something like that. And that just gives you a nice, when you start to do the assessment and things, that gives you the nice critical thinking covered off in one go. And it usually covers off all universities' graduate outcomes have something about critical thinking. So that's what I do. So that's my first starting point. A big wide one at the top, and then more specificity. How did we go? What words did you guys choose? What did you do? Go on, read one out. You're all right.
We start with the first one is describing.
Describing, yes.
We say describing the process of creating.
Yes. Yeah. Now remember, describe very long.
There is one, then
yes.
Second two.
Okay, cool. Yep, that's good. It's quite interesting. I will say, and it's not negative, but just be aware, if you were making a course for master's level, I would literally knock off the first 2. Don't even look there. Because they just don't give the intent of higher level relevant. Okay? But that's just a person. So go.
Second one is
developing great lectures. Yeah, that's good. Yep. Yep, perfect.
And last one, reframe.
Yes, that's a nice one.
Reframe, if we have current
yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. No, that's cool. That's good. How about you guys? What to do? Develop? Yeah.
Yeah, we were like doing develop or design.
Yep. Yep, that's cool. Design.
Yeah. And then, yeah, like we are going to teach more like acquired skills for online, face-to-face.
Yep. Acquire, that's good. That's good. Where's acquire? I don't even use that word before. It should be at the top end somewhere. Is it on the list or is it you made the word up? Not sure, that's fine. It's all right, don't relax. It would be a top end word. Yes, that's nice. Well done. Good. What I want you to get from the exercise is it's not as easy as you think. I want you to go home now and go, oh, these learning outcomes are actually tricky. They actually take some thought around. And so, yeah, for me personally, it would usually take me probably a weekend to toss what I want to do around in my mind and come up with a sequence of learning outcomes, maybe even longer than that, a couple of weekends of thinking to get to them. Now, one thing I would recommend too, don't just whack them onto your email and go to the boss, I've done the learning outcomes, because I'll bet you in 2 weeks' time after you start putting in the content, you'll go, oh, dear boss, can we please rescind number 3 and I'll replace it with this. And so, I always tell the story, do what Napoleon does. Napoleon, remember he was a French general, he used to have a little tent at the battlefield and his generals would rush in with a problem and he'd get them to write it down on a piece of paper. And he'd put it in the drawer of his desk, and if they didn't return in 3 days going, have you sorted out the problem, he'd toss it in the bin. And do a Napoleon, just put it in the drawer and just make sure you've got it right before you rush off and do things, because learning outcomes do evolve with time. And they are also very personal. They are also very personal. So if you have 2 people teaching in your class, if you have 2 people teaching in your class, the 2 of you need to talk to make sure you are both on the same refrain, okay? Because it is very different. And one of the other things that came up at lunchtime, what do you do if you have 2 people teaching a class? It is a lot harder to do that, because you need to be making sure you are on the same music with the other person. Okay? The best coordinate reference system in the world is WGS 84. No, the best coordinate reference system in the world is ND 64. Well, you know what? If I'm teaching a class on Tuesdays and I'm doing that, and on Thursdays you're doing that, a poor class. So, really important. If you have 2 people or more teaching a class, you need to sit down and you're going to have to give up some of what you believe in, and they're going to have to give up some of what they believe in to come to one story for your students.
Actually, I used to teach coordinates for undergraduate students. Myself and other 5 or 6 teachers with the same subject, and each one has different perspective.
Yes, it would have been a catastrophe. The students, as I said at lunchtime, always sit down, another tip on parents' tip list, think of everything from the student's view, not your own. Can you imagine a poor student coming on Tuesday to your class, and then the student comes to my class on Thursday, then they go to lunch together and go, oh, you've got to know about X. And they go, oh no, my teacher told me X is rubbish, and I talk about why. You know, if I told you the most difficult thing in teaching is actually that piece. Putting aside bits you really believe in. In dental, sorry to talk dental, but I just have to because it's my history. People have their favourite drill bits. I only drill with a 496 drill bit. And so the poor students get all these different messages about what drill bits to use, you know? And then
in clinic, we tell people, you know, the supplier only supplies 1 drill bit, but the ones who love other ones bring piles of them in their pocket and give them to students. And you're like, how on earth can I examine a student now when we've got all these different messages going on? So, folks, that's a put a star next to that tip. You need to sit down as a group of teachers and come to an agreed position on the topic. Okay? That was a really good lunchtime conversation. Good. Cool. Yeah.
The same situation happened for marking as well. I thought if one unit have the 2 2 tutors, 3 tutors, when they mark for different class, they have a different.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And we've tried all sorts of tricks to fix that, and I think we're doing an assessment thing. Yeah. But just to come to that right now, we've tried all sorts of, this rubric. That's the current trendy educational term. Sorry, the trendy educational term. We'll have a marking rubric, and we'll all follow the rubric. I've not seen that work. The same problem still remains. It's how you interpret the element of the rubric means you will mark differently. So I think the issue is, that's why I'm emphasising to you, you all need to sit down and have a good conversation, a solid conversation about where do I sit in the principles of this topic. Listen, I believe that cutting up salad into 1 square centimetre pieces is really important. No, I think it's 2. Well, for this course, can we compromise and go 2? Well, you need to have that conversation over the whole piece, otherwise the assessment goes bad, the teaching goes bad, it doesn't matter actually, I'll leave it like that. Your relationships with the students come adrift. Students get angry. Students will appeal. They'll do all things like that, and rightfully so. I've sat on the appeals board. I've been to ombudsman's judges about appeals, and just sat there and gone, well, that was crazy. Sorry, So you need to sit down together, and you need to do it. If it's the first time you've run this course, you need to do it every week. Make a time for morning tea. Every week, sit down and go, next week we're talking about door handles. What's your favourite door handle? Oh, no, those door handles are hopeless. Get it out. Talk about it. Have a laugh. And one thing, I actually take students in on that. I'll say, look, we're going to talk door handles this week, but Olivia, she's bad, She thinks handles are better than knobs. But, we're going to talk about knobs just to keep. Tell the students, they're not stupid. No student is crazy. If you share that there's a difference in perspective, but we will focus on this perspective as you're learning, that's important. So, you need to, if you are a team teaching event that is N times harder than you as an individual, at least you as an individual can have the argument about doorknobs in your own mind and get over it as you walk to work. Much harder. Really good point. Good. Any other questions on that sort of stuff?
I'm just thinking about the first that subject. For example, using A book or C book.
Yes.
That's happened to me.
Oh, it happens to all of us.
Because when I went to read and asking, we have different references, variety of references, and when I answer my exam in that way, usually we need that way. He said, we give you that to give you more information. So I said, so how can you judge me for I'm doing that or that?
Yeah.
You have to be clear in that question. We using reference A, for example.
Yes. Now, keep it in your mind. Make a social piece in it. Make a piece that has some social interaction. Oh, I got one more. I had a list. I should get it out. I'm doing it from memory. Assessment is not the be-all and end-all. Now that's controversial. Some places on earth would say you must assess everything to the nth degree, otherwise these bad students won't learn. Well, you know what? Most people when they get to university have come to learn. There's not many I know that have just come to sort of randomly come. So I think, and I'm I think it's the third session, I want to talk about that, the culture of learning. I don't want anyone from this little gang to ever talk about a bad student again. There's no such thing as a bad student. There's a student who, for some reason, something impacted them that's sent them offline, or they've decided to plagiarise or something. Most times, most of the cases of plagiarism I've seen in this university are not because the person is fundamentally bad. It's because there's been a pressure upon them in some form that's led them down a bad path. So please, when you build an educational piece, don't build for bad. I know many academics who build for bad. How many of you have seen a unit guide that says, if you get 48, we'll throw you out of the university. If you get 44.3, we'll, put you in prison for 10 years, or, It's written in the negative. Instead of starting at the top going, if you get 80, I'll buy you lunch. Or, don't go down the cultural position of students are bad. There are bad students. There are bad humans on earth. Let's get over that. But 99.9% of students are not bad. They want to learn. You don't have to assess them to death to learn. I use the little advanced techniques. No, you haven't. You've done advanced. No one's done advanced techniques. Yeah, a couple of you have. Think back. What did I say about assessment in the first week of advanced techniques? I said, you know what, everyone in this course passes and does well.
Yeah, this is like the first thing you said.
First things I said, can we stop worrying? Don't worry. No one has ever failed this course. Everyone has done well. I'm not interested. I'm interested in you being here, literally in this room, and learning something. Once you set a cultural message like that, the whole environment is different. People were willing to learn. Okay? So, yeah, it is. It's quite contra coup, isn't it? Most people think that you need to assess them.
But it's also, tricky because Ella.
Yeah, Ella.
So she tried to transfer what she learned.
Yes.
From you. But then the students, they were.
Took advantage.
Yes.
Yes.
And then they were not respectful.
Yes.
So that's tricky. How, there's a fine line.
Absolutely, there's a fine line. Now, Amel's raised a really, just for those who don't know, Ella is Amel's supervisor, used to be our student, and is now a senior academic in Saudi. That is, I have had that too. Students do take advantage. I think I have an advantage now. The taking advantage of a senior citizen in all cultures on earth is seen as pretty poor form. So in a sense, I have an advantage now of age. But I am also, in one course I've run for many years, I've shocked to hear, but that my nickname in the course was that I was the smiling assassin. Yeah, you look at me like that. Everyone looks at me like that. It's like, when I first heard it, I said, you sure it was me that they were talking about like that? Student, you need to, go, no, that's not appropriate. For example, I have a policy, as everyone here knows, you call me Mark. That's cool, I'm happy, call me Mark. But in dental schools, I have the policy, you call me Mark, but if we're with a patient, you call me Professor Tennant. And if you breach that, you get this really dim look at you. And if you set up a relationship with your students that they know when you get a dim look from someone, it's not good. But there will be times students will take advantage. Just have to sort of navigate that. It's not everyone though. So yeah, I really think, getting back to where we were, put a social piece in every course you build, particularly in the current climate. with the way things are on earth, we need a good social piece in it, okay? So put that in. And frankly, my advice at the moment is be explicit about that piece. I don't think universities have a problem with some explicitness of a social interaction to make this education solid and good. Because most universities now want good grades on the 5-star rating from, you know, Billy Smith's rating service or whatever, and that's how you get it. Any questions on those bits while I think of what else was on my little list to talk about? So let's run through them again. What were they? Social contract, social piece. Sustainability, if it was over 1,000, make sure you design for 1,000. Scalable technique. Simulation. Cross-subsidy. You need some small group stuff going on. All university students demanding that. You need this. No university student anymore wants 1,500 people in a lecture theatre all packed in and me sprouting off, memorise those 6 bones of the leg. Gone. So do some online. And the other one was, look outside your discipline. Do not be narrow. Look for new ideas, because the new ideas will not come from your own discipline. You know the new ideas in your own discipline. Look outside. Look outside. Any questions so far? What do you reckon? What do you think? Do you think you'd be able to do that? Yep. Do you have a course you would like to run?
Yeah.
What would you like to run?
Well, you're gonna go, Muhammad, you're gonna go teach in Saudi Arabia. So
You're going back to teach in Saudi?
Yeah, but
Conservation?
It's too early.
Too early.
Yeah.
Do you know what? You are allowed to aspire to something. I regularly hear students say it's too early to have it. That's okay, but, aspire to... I want to teach the master's program in conservation biology in my university because it's really badly run, and I reckon I can do a better job, and I can have 1,000 students from all over Earth learning about desert climates. Good on you. That's what I want to hear, and let that drive what experiment. I've only got to 30 years of teaching where I am today because I had a go at these different techniques and failed. I had Allah moments where I just wanted to hide under my doona and not look because students were gone crazy, I've been called a smiling assassin. I still don't get it. You need to experiment to come to that goal. You need to think about it. Simulate it in your own mind. If you were teaching this, what would you do differently? Always do that. Every unit guide you look at, you pick up a unit guide, you read it. Read it like you're the dean. Is this expensive? I'll tell you, every dean, that's the first question in their head. Is this expensive? Oh, no, he's got some online, that's good. Is this going to get me a 5-star rating on the Times guide? Oh, yes, it's got some, good things in it. Pick them up, download them from the internet and look at some. And go, I wouldn't do that. I'd add this and I'd take that off and I'd, whatever. Go through that process, okay? And actually reflect on the courses you've been in. That's the other really important thing. Go through the courses you've been in and think about, the other one. Do you want students to turn up at your course? Oh, there's many, many ways to make that happen, isn't it? I'm from the dental school of saluting, where they make you sign in. Did that make us turn up to uni? Well, it made us turn up, but we were angry people. It wasn't. Oh, that's all right. It wasn't real learning, was it? You know, we had 8 o'clock lectures. You had to turn up and sign in. What was the first thing you did in first year? Trained to be able to sign your mate's signature. One of the senior consultants in West Australia, I can sign his signature beautifully because we trained all the way through dental school. You know, so those sorts of penalty-driven methodologies are just not successful. That just makes angry students. So please don't get into penalty processes. It becomes what's it called? You know, swat a mole or whack a mole. You know, it becomes, you make them sign to come to lectures. Well, then they sign to come to lectures, but they don't come to prac. You make them sign to come to prac. Well, they come to prac, but then they all take sick leave on assessment day. Like, build a relationship with the people. Don't try and whack them with signing. We'll take 3% off your assessment every 36 milliseconds you're late. Well, that first day, what did I say at Advanced Techniques? If you've got a problem and you can't get it in on time, don't leave it till 11:59 on the Friday to write me an email. Write 4 or 5 days early and I will give you an extension. I will work that out. That's my problem, isn't it? Teacher, not yours. But if you leave it till 11:59 and 64 seconds, I'll be cranky. You won't get an extension. If you set the cultural boundaries and show respect for people, you don't play whack-a-mole. It doesn't help. So in terms of developing a teaching environment, don't do that. Don't try and find every criminal thing you possibly can. Because it doesn't work. I'm telling you, it doesn't work.
It's like building a trust.
Yeah, build some trust up. Human trust. It's a much better way of doing life, isn't it? Human trust. Cool. Now, I had a few more things to say on this in terms of techniques. Oh, yes. PowerPoints. That was the other thing I wanted to talk about. Slides. I have a rule, a sequence of rules. 1 slide per minute. 45-minute lecture, 45 slides maximum. I've had people come to me and go, Mark, does that include the hello slide and the references? Yes. And then the other trick I get with that is, Mark, I've only got 10 slides for 10 minutes. Oh, that's good. And then they've got 36 transitions in the 10 slides. Slide this in, slide that out. No. 1 slide per minute is about the rate people can take stuff in. 20 words per slide. 20 words. Not 200, 20. 1 concept per slide. No sound, movies, exploding stars in the corner, Hawaiian beaches with a palm tree floating in the corner. None. Gone.
But movies are related to the topic?
Hold. I'll come back to movies. And this is controversial now. You're going to brace yourself. Black and white only. Boring. You would call them boring. I would call them quite visible from the very back of the room when you forgot your glasses. I would call them works on any resolution screen on any cheap phone anywhere on earth. That's why I go black and white only.
It will be difficult to remember.
Eh?
It will be difficult to remember if I just use black and white.
Ah, that's interesting.
I believe in colour, so
Yes. Okay, that's an interesting variation. Never thought of that. Wow. Okay. Fair enough. What else on my list? I have 10 slides, 10 rules. I'll send you an email with my 10 rules of slides. I said no transitions, didn't I? I've forgotten one. Oh, tables. Tables need to be readable from the back of the room. Please don't. This just drives me bonkers when I see people who get the paper, cut the table and stick the JPEG, low resolution, in the middle of their slide. You know, already the font is blurry on these very old 800 pixel projectors, and then when you're sitting 50 feet away, you might as well have just put a pixelated human on it and you wouldn't know what it was, you know. So please, careful. So that's my tips on slides. Why did I leave out movies? I leave out movies. I don't mind movies. It's not that I'm negative to movies being a teaching tool. In fact, I use them all the time. But embedded in slides is dangerous because sometimes you'll go to places to give talks and there will be no internet, or you haven't got the Wi-Fi password and you're resting on YouTube to play them or something like that. So I always keep the movies separate from the slides and I'll play them as an independently thing afterwards. And if I am going to do this teaching in various places, I will download the movie from YouTube and actually keep a copy fully on my laptop. So just be aware. But yeah, please, I see some absolutely horrendously negative things about slides. When you make a sequence of slides for a lecture, always at the front, for teaching purposes, put the outcomes. This sequence of slides is to achieve this, this and this. And that way your students won't come back to you and go, I've watched your slides, but I don't know what to learn for the test. Which is a very common email an academic gets in this day and age. What do I learn for the test? If you've put the 4 things at the front on the first slide, I think also students like the idea of the patterning of that, in the sense of every lecture Mark gives, the first slide tells me what I need to get out of this lecture. Get into the pattern. That's a really important thing to do. Get that up front. This is what you need to get from this. And the last slide always, even if I've taught the group 36 lectures in a semester, the last slide always has, you can always contact Mark at mark.tennant.uwa. Leave contact. I do that not for the students. In fact, I do that because there are occasions when I've gone to other places and walked through a computer. This happened in Queensland. I was with the Dean looking at a dental school and we were walking past the computer lab. And my locked lectures from UWA, I could see on the screens of students watching them. It was like, I know you've got those somehow. And so by putting your own name and things at the far end, at least if they have a question, they know who to contact to ask. So always, put your contact details. And the last thing on that is, what time is it? How are we going, Mossa? Am I all right? Excellent. The last thing on that is be generous with your slides. You are in academic life for the long haul. You're not here for this week. You're not here for next week. It's a long haul game, this. And that means share your materials with others. It will pay back dividends. You will make friends that way, and those friends, when you need their help, they will return the favour. So if you make a set of slides and someone rings you up and says, please, could could I use, yeah, no worries. Just leave my name on the end, but go for it. Be generous with your slide sets. I wasn't always. I'm the first to admit I was a young person like you guys, and when School A said, we don't want you anymore, go away, you know, I was the first to go, right, well, I'm going home to my computer to hit the delete button 1,000,000 times in anger. It pays no dividends, trust me, pays no dividends. So be generous with your slide sets. That does pay dividends in the end. You know, you will get return favour from that. You will get the fun, exciting journeys of... I was in Geneva a while back now, 8 years ago or something, walking down a passage on a tour. I heard these footsteps run up behind us. I was with the Dean, and in that culture, no student talks to anyone standing with the Dean. It's like the Dean is sort of 7 degrees of separation away. And this person tapped me on the shoulder, and it's like, oh. So I turned around like this, and it's a student, because they've got a student clinical coat on, we know the colouring. And the student goes, in broken French English, goes, I heard your voice. Are you the man from YouTube? You know, you share your lectures, and you get the fun times of random people going, oh, you're the voice, particularly for my weird Australian accent. For a European, it was like strange. So, you know, you get advantage in all sorts of ways from sharing your stuff. Share your stuff, be generous. Be generous. Personally, I think PowerPoint slides are way overcooked. It's way too easy to make them. People almost see that as the lecture or the content. That's not. Humans remember stuff not because of what they see on a screen. Humans remember stuff because of what happened in the interaction. So please be really careful, be frugal with slides. Don't think that you can just, oh, that's the other thing. Please don't do this. Put the slide up, turn around, and read it to people. Don't read the slides out. You know, that's just a catastrophe in the making. There'll be no one in the class next week. And they can read themselves, sort of thing. So use the slides to augment the story you're telling, or sharing a story, or make the connection with people. So yeah, I think that's my list for today about giving good teaching material. If you came expecting me to have given you a list of what to do, that was never going to happen under my watch. So I hope not. I hope you wanted how to work with it. Any questions?
So I don't have a question. I was curious about one thing, because I got some students, they said, lecture slides because last year the COVID lockdown, students just watched the slides online.
Yeah.
Last year, my students said, the YouTube video is more clearly and more detailed than the lecture slides. Because I'm teaching the computer language, C language, and
yes.
how computers are, and some of the lecture slide it's not recorded by myself. I'm the tutor,
yes.
Recorded by the lecture, and
yes.
some students complaining about the YouTube is more clear, more
yes.
more detailed.
Do you know what? That's going to be normal, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's going to be people learning by different methods in the same room. Some people are going to love YouTube. They're going to think you are the worst thing that ever existed on earth. And then there's going to be others who are going to go, wow, I really love coming to class just because you tell a bit of a story and I can understand, you know, pointers better, but I like watching the videos or whatever it might be. Don't worry about that. There are people learning in different forms. That's okay. And certainly computer languages, I spend my life in this game as well, they're somewhat they're somewhat prone to being easier to teach on video. You know, videos of computer language learning are actually the way to do it, isn't it, really? You can sense it's easy to learn a language from tape. You know, there's some fantastic YouTube tapes of languaging. So I think you're in a tough boat to try and run tutorials after they've listened to it on the tape. What would I do? That's a good question. What would I do when I get something negative like that? I'd actually have a think about how can I augment the tapes, not try and replicate them. What can I add? Value add. What you might be able to value add. You could say, hey, listen, you know, you watched those 2 tapes. This week you were supposed to watch those 3 tapes. What did you get from it? What was the problem? And then work through the problems they had from the tape. Or next week's tape is about pointers. Let's just do a little bit on what pointers mean, you know, how that works or something. Look to value add, not to replicate. Because then if you replicate, a student will just compare you to the tape and go, you know, as they do to me too. I've had student feedback. I've had those, and still today, forget it, today, I still get feedback like, hated your course, worst thing on earth. You know, and you go home crushed. You know, if you care about your teaching, you go home and you sit on the couch, crushed. But you know, there's many times they are just different learning styles. I'll share one fun story to finish on that topic. I live in a little house up here. It's a little cottage, and the next one next door is right next door. So they're only about 2 metres apart. And we both have back gardens, they're very old, and we have verandas. The one next door is often rented out to a bunch of students. Anyway, this is a warning about not enjoying a lecturer. One day I could hear, and I'll clean this up because there was a lot of foul language in it. One day I could hear like the chipmunks going in the background. And then every so often I thought, that's sort of, there's a bit there, I swear that's my voice. And then a little tag of my voice, and I went, oh, what's that? And then one of the students outside came out and with a whole bunch of Australian expletives shouted across all of the district. If you lived in college, you probably heard it from all of my house, miles away. My lecturer has just told me that all 13 lectures are in the exam. Can you, suite of Australian words, believe it? And the other bloke on the veranda goes, oh, I just can't believe how abusive your lecturer is.
How to work out which pieces of science and science and other. So yeah, I think that's a really good point to raise. Any other questions, commentary? All right. What I want to do now is, now that we've fundamentally, I want to talk a little bit now, and we'll talk a lot, on different teaching techniques. We've got 3 courses now, so I want to talk about that. And I don't have any slides, I just wanted to share others. I think my perspective is you need to think about your topic and which technique fits the topic and which technique fits the individuals at that time. Now, historically, we would have said at that time, but I don't know. And there is not one right answer to this. So the old traditional lecture, in a lecture hall, be it with or without PowerPoint slides, with or without PowerPoint slides, there's still a place for that. If you are doing some of those verbs around memorise, or there's still a good place for that. So I'm not of the view that that's out the window. But you might have, I think that can be done with a whole bunch of online. I think think tutorials, small group or others, is going to explode. That's massive. Because the idea of, you think of yourselves, how many of you have you done any lockdown at all during the last 2 years? Other than a few days in West Australia, doesn't count. None of us. Okay. The word I get from people who are in it long is working on your computer as an education is not an education. It's just sort of watching film. This is education. Getting together and having a discussion. So my view is, for you, put on the list of teaching methodologies, this is going to be the growing term. What you're sitting doing right now is what's going to grow. Be ready. Thinking about how you will present in this way. Okay? I think the online piece is going to grow dramatically in not only existing quantities, but I think in qualities as well. I look down at physiology, for example. Physiology has now got all of that, those of you, those of you in biology and all that lab stuff, particularly physiology where you have electrode on muscle, what goes on, and all sorts of things and all that sort of stuff. That's all done by simulation. So I think simulation is going to become big time. The cost of simulation is coming down. Aircraft education. Aircraft education now, flight, piloting, is 80% simulation. Theatre emergencies. We have one of these suites down here. I've watched them, they're just sweating over dummies on tables. The simulation is so good, they're stressed and sweating. So I think simulation is coming big time. I think start looking through that. How would you use simulation in a really approach to simulation, small group stuff. The issue is the small group stuff is expensive. Look at this. We're going to talk about customer and about customer. Small group is expensive, so you need to be able to cross-subsidise it by doing other things that are cheap to make time more expensive. Small group simulation. I think we're going to see a lot more simulation at distance. Small group simulation. I think we're going to see a lot more simulation at distance. For example, dental school is a great example. Online robotic competition. And it's worked amazing. Phenomenal outcome. So I think we'll see lots more of that. Packs of equipment going to people across the country. So please get thinking about that sort of thing. And that raised for me, in my mind earlier, that raised for me, how do you think up what you're going to do? You don't listen to people like, how do I think up the MIT thing? How do I go, oh, look, that's coming. Read outside your discipline. Mark's tip 2. It's on your tip list. Read what teaching is going on outside your discipline. Because when you're just reading your discipline, you read the doctrine of the day. All you read is what the person before you did. You don't think about action yourself. A huge, huge important thing. Read widely. A modern academic teacher needs to read widely and experiment with taking stuff from other classes. Did you used to give me the, I said, pilots? I don't know about pilots in class, because there's stuff there that we can steal. Then I talked about MIT and the robotics course. Let's steal from them. You get it? Read widely and always be sucking in their ideas and keeping a little note sheet on the wall about new teaching. Wow, that's really amazing. I'll tell you how I got that idea. The Director General of Health, years ago, used to keep on his desk, you know, obviously important documents to work on things, but there used to be this great big pile of them. And I said, what's the pile? He said, oh, that's all the annual reports and, you know, newsy colour brochure things that I get sent. I just get them piled up in the corner, and then over summer I just look through them for good ideas. That's so ever since electronically the results all paper electronically, I just pile that stuff up and go quickly look through it. I get the MIT News, get the Harvard News. Not my own. My own is I get people every day, why would I read that again? Get other places where I just. So I think you need to, you know, in terms of the techniques of teaching, do not have a course given to you and go, okay, I'll just give the 64 lectures like the person before me. Put the sheet of paper down and go, see any ways I can do this different, this is more effective, it's more cost effective. I've got one more thing to add to this now. Look for techniques that are scalable. That's really important. Write the word scalable down. There's no point in the assessment process or the teaching process that needs 20 of your hours per student. I tell everyone, always imagine your course has gone from 20 students to 1,000 students per week. How would you cope if there were 1,000 students? So when you design your course, design it, scale it. I tell everyone to do that. In your head, design it that you have a course of 1,000 students. How are you going to do it? 1,000 students, only half in Australia. How are you going to do this? If you put that thinking cap on before you start, do it easy. Pretty lucky, you will make money. You will make happy students. So, scale it. Take ideas from elsewhere. Go down the sim path as much as you can. But at the same time, work out to have some social piece to it. That's the next thing it says. All education needs a social piece. You guys are sat, thank you. You guys are sat, had a lovely lunch today together. You've shared your stories. We're sitting here now, chatting. We looked up a professor that we all knew earlier in the day. You know, that is education, isn't it? Yep. That's not cheating will be bad. That's part of what education is. There's a social piece to education. So when you design a course, designing that social piece. You don't have to write it on the unit guide, because I suspect your dean will go, are you serious? You guys can have lunch once a month together? You know. But if you want good marks on your outcome at the end, give it to your mind. Huh? Just give it in your mind. Give it in your mind. Make a social piece. Make a piece that has some social interaction. I've got one more. I have this. Assessment is not the be-all and end-all. Now that's controversial. Some places on earth would say you must assess everything to the nth degree, otherwise these bad students won't learn. Well, you know what? Most people when they get to university have come to learn. There's not many I know that just come to sort of randomly come. So I think, and I think it's the third session I want to talk about that, the culture of learning. I don't want anyone from this little gang to ever talk about a bad student again. There's no such thing as a bad student. There's a student who, for some reason, something impacted on this. Except my father, decided to plagiarise or something. Most times, most of the cases of plagiarism are not seen at this university. They're not because the person is trying to do bad, it's because there's been pressure upon them at some point. It's led them down a bad path. So please, when you build an educational piece, don't build for bad. I know many academics who build for bad. How many of you seen a unit guide that says, if you get 48, we'll throw you out of university, if you get 44.3, we'll put you in prison for 2 years? It's written in the negative. Instead of starting talking about, if you get 80, I'll buy you lunch. Well, don't go down the cultural position of students are bad. There are bad students, there are bad humans on earth. Let's get over that. But 99% of students are not bad. They want to learn. You don't have to assess them to death to learn. Of students are bad. There are bad students, there are bad humans on earth. Let's get over that. But 99% of students are not bad. They want to learn. You don't have to assess them to death to learn. Because of the advanced techniques, you've done it. No one's done advanced techniques.
Yeah, I have to do.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. Think back. What did I say about assessment in the first week of advanced techniques? I said, you know what, everyone in this course passes and does well.
Yeah, this is what I'm interested in.
The first thing I said, can you stop worrying? Don't worry. No one has ever failed this course. Everyone has done well. I'm not interested. I'm interested in you being here, in this room, and learning something. Once you set a cultural message like that, the whole environment is different. People are willing to learn. So, yeah, it is quite controversial, isn't it? Most people think that you need to.
But also not true because Anna.
Yeah, Ella.
So she tried to transfer, but she didn't.
Yes.
But then the students, they were.
Took advantage.
Yes.
Yes.
And then they were not respectful.
Yes.
So that's tricky. How, there's a fine line.
Absolutely, there's a fine line. Now, Hamel Tracer, just for those who don't know, Ella is a Hamel supervisor, used to be our student, and is now a senior academic in SAD. That is, I have had that too. Students do take advantage. I think I have an advantage now. Taking advantage of that senior citizen in all cultures on earth is seen to be fulfilling. So in a sense, I have an advantage now of age. But I'm also, in one course I run, for years, I'm shocked to hear that my nickname in the course was that I was the smiling assassin. Yeah, you look a bit like, everyone must be like, it's like, when I first heard it, I said, you sure it was me? Was I talking about it? Student, you need to just go, no, that's not appropriate. For example, I have a policy that you will let everyone knows, you call me right. That's good. But in dental schools, I have a policy, you call me right, but do all the patient before the first attempt. And if you breach that, you get this really dim look at you. And if you set up a relationship with your student, that they know you get English and so on, it's not good. But there will be times students will take advantage. Just have to sort of navigate that. It's not So yeah, I really think that getting back to where we were, put a social piece in every course you do, particularly in the current climate. With the way things are on Earth, we need a good social piece in there. Okay? So put that in. And frankly, my advice at the moment is be explicit about that, please. I don't think universities have a problem with some explicit and stuff, a social interaction to make education solid. Because most universities now want good grades on the 5-star rating from, Billy Smith's rating service or whatever. They say any questions on those bits while I think of what else was on my list to talk about? So let's run through them again. What were they? Social contract, social piece. Sustainability, it's over 1,000, make sure you design for 1,000. Scale counting. Simulation. Cross-subsidy. You need some small group stuff going on. All university students to know. Yes. No university student anymore wants 1,500 people who actually they're all packed in at least scratch and memorise those 6 components of the level. Go on. So do some online. And then the other one was look outside your discipline. Do not be narrow. Look for new ideas, because the new ideas will not come from your own discipline. You know the new ideas in your own discipline. Look outside. Any questions so far? What do you reckon? What do you think? Do you think you'd be able to do that?
Yep.
Yep? Do you have a course you would like to run?
Yeah.
What would you like to run? You're going back to teaching Saturday?
Yeah, but it's too early now.
Too early?
Yeah, I'm just...
You know what? You are allowed to aspire to something. I regularly hear students say it's too early. That's okay, but I'm allowed to aspire to something. I regularly hear students say it's too early. That's okay, but aspire to. I want to teach a master's program in conservation biology in my university.
Yeah.
Because it's really badly run, and I reckon I could do a better job, and I could have 1,000 students from all over Earth learning about desert climates. Good on you.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
And let that drive while you experiment.
Yeah.
I've only got to 30 years of teaching where I am today because I had a go at these different techniques and failed. I had our moments where I just wanted to hide and not do and not look because students have gone crazy. I've been called a smiley, so still don't get it. So you need to experiment to come to that point.
Yeah.
You need to think about it. Yeah. Simulate it in your own mind. If you were teaching this, what would you do differently? Always do that. Every unit guide you look at, you pick up a unit guide, you read it. Read it like you're the dean. Is this expensive? I'll tell you every day. That's the first question you hear. Is this expensive? Oh, that's all right. That's good. Is this going to get me a 5-star rating on the Times guide? Yes, it's got some good things in it. Yep. Pick them up. Download. Pick them up. Download them from the internet and look at something. And go, oh, I wouldn't do that. I'd have this and I'd take that off. Whatever. Go through that process. Okay? And actually reflect on the courses you've been in. That's the other really important thing. Go through the courses you've been in and think about, I'm from the Devon School of Saluting, where they make you sign in. Did that make us turn up to uni? Well, it made us turn up, but we were angry people. It wasn't like that. So it wasn't good learning, was it? You know, we had 8 o'clock lectures. We had to turn up and sign in. What was the first thing we did in first year? Trained to be able to sign your mate's signature. One of the senior consultants in West Australia, I can sign your signature beautifully, because we trained all over the law school. Yeah, so those sorts of penalty-driven methodologies are just nonsense. That's what I just make out of the students. So please don't get into penalty processes. It becomes what's the swat a mole or whack a mole. It becomes you make them sign to come to lectures. Well, then they sign to come to lectures, but they don't come to crap. You make them sign to come to crap, well, they come to crap, but then they all take sick leave on assessment day. Build a relationship with the people. Don't try and whack them with signing. I'll take 3% off your assessment every 36 milliseconds you're late. First day, I say advanced techniques. If you've got a problem you can't get it in on time, don't leave until 11:59 on Friday or right? 4 or 5 days ago. And I would give you an extension. I would work that out as time. Extension. I would work that out as time. But if you leave until 11:59 and 64 seconds, I'll be cranky. You won't get it. You set the clock to boundaries and show respect for people. Don't play whack-a-mole. Doesn't matter. So in terms of developing a teaching environment, don't do that. Don't try and find every criminal thing you possibly can. It doesn't matter. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. Like building trust. Yeah, build some trust up. You need trust. It's a much better way of doing life than building trust. Cool. Now I had a few more things to say on this. In terms of techniques. Oh yes, PowerPoints. That was the other thing I wanted to talk about. Slides. I have a rule. A sequence of rules. 1 slide per minute. 45 minutes, 45 slides maximum. I've had people come to me and go, Mark, does that include the hello slide with the references? Yes. And then another trick I get with that is, Mark, I've only got 10 slides for 10 minutes. Oh, that's good. And then they've got 36 transitions in the 10 slides. And then slide is 6 like that. 1 slide per minute is about the rate people can take stuff in. 20 words per slide. 20 words. Not too much. 1 concept per slide. No sound, movies, exploding stars in the corner, Hawaiian beaches with a palm tree floating in the corner. No, gone. And this is controversial, I'm going to brace yourself. Black and white only. Boring. You would call them boring. I would call them quite visible from the very back of the room when you forgot your glasses.
Yeah.
I would call them works on any resolution screen on any cheap phone anywhere on earth. That's why we're like wine. Yes. Okay, that's an interesting variation. Never thought of that. Okay. Fair enough. What else? I tend to slides 10 rules. I'm not actually, I'll see you in my 10 rules of slide. And yeah, I said no transitions to not. I forgot my name. Oh, tables. Tables need to be readable from the back of the room. Please don't, just drives me bonkers. When I see people who get the paper, cut the table, stick the JPEG, low resolution, in the middle of their slide. You know, already the font is blurry on these very old 800 pixel projectors, and then when you're sitting 50 feet away, you might as well have just put a pixelated human on it. You wouldn't know what it was. You know? So please, check. So that's my tips on slides. Why did I leave out movies? I leave out movies. I don't mind movies. It's not that I'm negative to movies being a teaching tool. In fact, I use them all the time. But embedded in slides is dangerous. Because sometimes you go to places to give talks and there was no internet, or you've got the Wi-Fi password and you're resting on YouTube to play them or something like that. So I always keep the movies separate from the slides and play them as independent thing afterwards. And if I am going to do this teaching in various places, I will download the movie from YouTube and actually keep a copy and put it in my user. So just be aware. But yeah, please, I see some absolutely horrendous negative things about slides. When you make a sequence of slides for a lecture, always at the front, for teaching purposes, put the outcomes. This sequence of slides is to achieve this, this, and this. And that way your students won't come back to you and go, I've watched a slide, but I don't know what to learn from the text. Which is a very common email an academic gets in this day and age. What do I learn from the text? If you put the 4 things at the front on the first slide, I think also students like that to catch me back in the sense of every lecture mark gives the first slide, tells me what I need to get out of this lecture. Get into the pattern. That's a really important to do. Get that up front. This is what you need to get from this. And the last slide always, even if I talk through 36 lectures in a semester, the last slide always goes, you can always contact Mark about what's in what you're doing. Leave contact. I do that not for the students, in fact I do that because there are occasions when I've gone to other places and walked through a computer. It's happened in Queensland. I was with the dean looking at a dental school and we were walking past the computer lab. And my locked lectures from UWA, I could see on the screen the students watching them. I was like, you've got those something. And so by putting your own name and things at the far end, at least if they have a question, they know who to contact to ask. So always who to contact these days. And then the last thing on that is, are we going on? Excellent. The last thing on that is be generous with your slides. You are in academic life for the long haul. You're not here for this week. You're not here for next week. Okay? It's a long haul game. And that means share your materials with others. It will pay back dividends. You will make friends that way, and those friends, when you need their help, they will return the favour. So, if you make a set of slides and someone rings you up and says, please, could I use any worries? Just leave the name on the end, but go for it. Be generous with your slide sets. I wasn't always. I'm the first to admit I was a young person like you guys, and when school age said we don't want anyone to go away, I was the first to go, right, well, I'm going home to my computer that you can delete button really times. And it pays no dividends, trust me, it pays no dividends. So be generous with your slide sets. That does pay dividends in the end. You will get return favour programs. You will get the fun, exciting journeys of Geneva. I think 8 years ago, so walking down the passage on a tour, I heard these footsteps run up behind us. I was with the dean, and in that culture, no student talks to anyone standing on the side. The dean is 7 degrees of separation away. And this person tapped me on the shoulder. So I turned around like this, and it's a student, because I got a student for the coach on the cover. And the student goes, in broken French English, goes, I heard your voice. Are you the man from YouTube? You share your lectures, and you get the fun times of random people going, you're the voice, particularly for my new Australian accent, but you're a bit really strange. So, you get advantage in all sorts of ways from sharing your stuff. Share your stuff, be generous. Be generous. Personally, I think PowerPoint slides are way overcooked. It's way too easy to make them. People almost think that that's the lecture or the content. That's not. Humans remember stuff not because of what they see on the screen. Humans remember stuff because of what happened in the interaction. Please be really careful and frugal with slides. Don't think that you can just, that's the other thing. Don't do this. Put the slide up, turn around, and read it to people. Don't read the slides up. That's just a catastrophe in the making. But we know what the class next level. They can read themselves. So that you can just, that's the other thing. Don't do this. Put the slide up, turn around, and read it to people. Don't read the slides up. That's just a catastrophe in the making. But we know what the class next level. They can read themselves. So, use the slides to augment the story you're telling, or sharing a story, or the connection with people. So yeah, I think that's my list for today about teaching material. If you came expecting me to put you on a list of what to do, I was never going to have another mile rush. I hope you know how to work with it. Any questions?
So I got a question. I was curious about one thing, because I got some students, they said the lecture slides of, because last year the COVID, the lockdown, students just watched the slides online, the first semester last year, and students said the YouTube video is more clearly and more detailed than the lecture slides. Because I'm teaching the computer language, C language, and how to use R, and some of the lecture slide it's not recorded by myself. I'm the tutor, and recorded by the lecturer, and some students complaining about the YouTube is more clear, more more detailed.
That's going to be normal, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's going to be people learning by different methods.
Yeah.
in the same room. Some people are going to love YouTube.
Yeah.
They're going to think you are the worst thing that ever existed on earth.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be others who are going to go, oh, I really love coming to class just because you tell a bit of a story and I can understand, pointers better, but I like watching the videos or whatever it might be. Don't worry about it. There are people learning in different forms. That's okay. And certainly computer languages.
Yeah.
And certainly computer languages.
Yeah.
Spend my life in this game as well. They're somewhat prone to be easier to teach on video. Videos of computer language learning are actually the way to do it, isn't it, really? In a sense, it's easy to learn a language from tape. There's some fantastic YouTube tapes of language. So I think you're in a tough boat. To try and run tutorials after that is a bit rather tough. What would I do? That's a good question. What would I do when I get something negative like that? I actually have to think about how can I augment the tapes, not to try and replicate them. What can I add? Value add. What you might be able to value add. You could say, hey listen, you watch those 2 tapes. This week you were supposed to watch those 3 tapes. What did you get from them? What was the problem? And then work through the problems they had from the tape. Or next week's tape is about pointers. Let's just do a little bit on what pointers mean and how that works or something. Not to value add, not to replicate. Because then, if you replicate, a student will just compare you to the tape and go, yeah, as they do to me too. I've had student feedback. I've had those. And still today, forget it, today, I still get feedback like, hey, of course, worst thing on earth. And you go home crushed. If you care about teaching, you go home and you sit on the couch, crushed. As many times, they are just different learning styles. I'll share one fun story to finish on that topic. I live in a little house up here, a little cottage, the next one is yours right next to it. We're only about 2 meters apart. And we both look back out into the very old, and we have rains. The one next door is often rented out to other students. This is a warning about not enjoying lecture. One day, I could hear, and I'll clean this up because there's a lot of foul language in it. One day, I could hear like the chipmunks going in the background. And then every so often I thought, and then one of the students outside came out with a whole bunch of Australian expletives shouted across all of the district. If you lived in college, you probably heard it from all my acts. My lecturer has just told me that all 13 lectures are in the exam. Can you, sweet Australian words, believe it? And the other bloke on the veranda goes, I just can't believe how abusive the lecturer is. A whole bunch of Australian speakers about lecturing. 4 metres away, I had written to the student that all 13 lectures that was talking about me on the veranda. And then we had a street party the following week. You should have seen the riots when the senior professor walked out to the street party and introduced himself. The chipmunks, they were playing my lectures at Common Street. And every song they swallowed to one time, so I hear what they say. So you're not going to please everyone. And all 13 lectures were in the test. So yeah, don't worry about it. You're all right. Any other questions? Being a new academic is not easy. It's very difficult. academics are not often really supporting each other either. So you just hold on. It's okay. We'll do all right. And don't take every piece of feedback like I used to. Learn from me. I used to take it really bad. I used to sit on the couch, I would cry. I'm never going to make it. Oh, drop off. That's a really good point. And you're sorry to keep you, I know you're ready to go. Right. But yeah, I should comment on that. You know, I taught 1,200 students here, and only 80 would come to the lecture. Now that's, you can imagine, a room ready for 1,000 students and there's 80 students splattered in the room. Absolutely debilitating, isn't it? Makes you just want to go, oh, what else? No. Don't worry about it. That's their choice. This is not the military. It's their choice. If they don't want to listen and learn, that's okay. You just keep doing your best. But it does make you sad, I know. I know. Good. Yes. No, we need to go. All right. Thank you for coming. Please. Looking forward to next time. We'll have another topic for next time. Next 2 weeks' time. Here again. And thank you for organising. Really appreciate it, Master. It's a beautiful day. Good day. Thank you.